The storm came without warning. Dark clouds rolled over the hills like angry waves, swallowing the last light of the sun. The air smelled of wet earth and thunder. In the distance, the farm's old windmill spun wildly, creaking like a ghost trapped in wood and wind. Lucas stood at the doorway of the barn, his worn flannel shirt soaked through. The young farmer had lived many storms in his life, but this one carried something different, a heaviness that he couldn't explain. Beside him, his loyal Labrador Thor barked into the distance, ears sharp, tail stiff, as if warning of something unseen. "Easy boy," Lucas muttered, patting the dog's wet fur. But Thor didn't come. Instead, he bolted toward the dirt road that cut through the fields, the road that led to nowhere. Lightning struck nearby, flashing white across the muddy fields. And then Lucas saw it, a figure struggling against the wind, half collapsing with each step. A man, dressed in dark clothes, dragging something behind him. A small suitcase? Or maybe a secret heavier than its weight. Lucas hesitated for a heartbeat, then ran. "Hey, sir! Over here!" he shouted, his voice nearly drowned by the storm. The man didn't respond. When Lucas finally reached him, the stranger was on his knees, coughing, his face pale as the rain. Thor circled him protectively, barking louder. Lucas grabbed the man by the arm. "Come on, you'll freeze to death out here." Together, they stumbled back to the farmhouse. Inside, the wood stove glowed faintly. Lucas threw another log on the fire while the stranger sat silently, dripping water onto the floorboards. His eyes, sharp gray, followed Thor's every move. "Name's Lucas," the farmer said, offering a towel. "This here's Thor. You picked a hell of a night to travel." The man didn't speak at first. Then in a low, rough voice he said, "I didn't plan to travel at all." There was something in his tone, regret, maybe. Or fear. Lucas studied him. The man looked mid-40s, maybe older, with lines that spoke of long nights and heavy thoughts. His right hand trembled slightly as he held the cup of coffee Lucas offered. "You from around here?" Lucas asked. The stranger gave a half-smile. "Used to be. Long time ago." Thor sniffed at his boots and growled, a quiet, uneasy sound that made Lucas frown. Thor was gentle with everyone, but not tonight. "Don't mind him," Lucas said, trying to sound casual. "He doesn't usually growl unless—" "Unless what?" the man interrupted. Lucas hesitated. "Unless he feels danger." The fire crackled between them. Outside, thunder rolled like a warning drum. The man leaned back in the chair, eyes lost in the flames. "My name's Edward Grant," he finally said. "If you'll let me stay the night, I'll leave by morning." Lucas nodded slowly. Something about the name felt familiar. But he couldn't place it. Thor sat near the door, staring at the man without blinking, a silent guardian under the glow of the fire. That night, the wind screamed through the valley, rattling the windows and shaking the barn doors. But inside, the real storm had only just begun. Morning came gray and heavy. The farm smelled of damp soil and hay. Lucas rose early, feeding the chickens while Thor ran through the fields, sniffing around the stranger's footprints that led nowhere. Edward had slept on the couch, though from the look of his eyes, he hadn't slept much at all. "Breakfast's on the table," Lucas said, placing eggs and bread down. "You're welcome to stay a day or two until the road's clear." Edward gave a polite nod, but his mind seemed distant, restless. He looked out the window toward the barn. "Used to be a big family farm once, right?" he asked quietly. Lucas froze mid-step. "How'd you know that?" The man smiled faintly. "I told you. I used to live around here." Lucas sat down across from him. "You said you used to. Why'd you leave?" Edward's eyes darkened. "Because some mistakes don't let you stay." He said nothing more, and the silence felt heavy. Thor entered the room, carrying something in his mouth, a rusty silver locket, covered in dirt. He dropped it by Edward's feet. Edward's face turned pale. Where did he find this?" Lucas frowned. "Probably near the creek. He's always digging things up." Edward opened the locket. Inside was a faded photo, a woman and a child. He closed it quickly, his jaw tightening. "Old memories," he murmured. "Some should have stayed buried." Thor whined softly, as if sensing the weight in the man's heart. That evening, rain began again, softer this time, almost whispering secrets on the roof. Lucas sat by the window, fixing an old lantern, while Edward stood outside near the barn, staring toward the hills. Thor followed him, uneasy but curious. When lightning flashed, Lucas saw the two of them framed against the sky, the stranger and his dog, shadows under the storm. Moments later, a shout echoed. Lucas ran outside. Thor was barking furiously near the old well, the one Lucas had sealed years ago. Edward stood frozen, staring into the darkness of the well's mouth. "Stay back!" Edward cried. Lucas stopped. "What is it?" Edward's voice shook. I buried something here. Years ago." Lucas frowned. "Buried what?" But before Edward could answer, the wooden cover of the well collapsed. A gust of cold air rose from within, carrying the faint, metallic scent of something old. Edward stepped closer, trembling. "I thought I could leave it behind. I thought it was over." Lucas's heart pounded. "What's down there, Edward?" Edward turned, his gray eyes glistening. "My past." Thunder cracked above them, and for a moment, Lucas saw the reflection of pain and guilt written across Edward's face. Inside the house later that night, Edward finally spoke. "I used to work for your father," he confessed. "Before the accident." Lucas stiffened. "My father's accident?" Edward nodded. "It wasn't an accident, Lucas. It was me." The room fell silent except for the rain tapping against the windows. "I didn't mean to hurt him," Edward said. "He caught me stealing. I panicked, pushed him. He fell into that same well. I buried the truth and ran. I thought no one would ever find me again." Lucas stood frozen, every breath burning in his chest. Thor stood between them, growling softly, not in anger, but in instinctive protection. "You came back here after all these years, why?" Lucas demanded. Edward's voice broke. "Because I couldn't carry it anymore. I wanted to face what I did, to confess. The storm last night wasn't what brought me here. My conscience did." Thor barked once, sharp, echoing like a judge's gavel in the quiet room. Lucas turned away, tears blurring his sight. "You destroyed my family." Edward didn't argue. He simply placed the locket on the table, the same one Thor had found. "It belonged to your mother," Edward whispered. "She gave it to me, before she knew the truth." Lucas's hands shook. "Get out. Before I do something I'll regret." Edward nodded slowly. "I deserve that." But Thor barked again, louder this time, not at Edward, but toward the window. Lightning flared outside, and Lucas saw smoke rising from the barn. "The hayloft!" Lucas shouted. He ran outside into the rain. The barn was on fire, flames licking through the roof, devouring the night. Inside, trapped behind a fallen beam, were 2 calves and a dozen chickens, the last of Lucas's livestock. Without hesitation, Lucas grabbed an axe and ran inside, coughing from the smoke. Thor followed, barking desperately. Then, through the chaos, Edward appeared. He pushed past the flames, grabbing the calves' ropes and dragging them toward the exit. A beam fell. Thor barked and lunged, pulling Edward by his coat, guiding him through the smoke. When they finally stumbled out, Edward collapsed on the wet ground, coughing blood. Lucas knelt beside him. "You saved them." "Why?" Edward smiled weakly. "Because I owed you more than an apology." The storm finally broke at dawn. Rain turned to drizzle, then to silence. Smoke rose from the blackened barn, curling into the pale sky like ghosts ascending. The smell of ash mixed with wet earth. Edward lay inside the farmhouse, pale and weak. His lungs were burned, his body broken. But his eyes were calm, almost peaceful. Lucas sat by his side, Thor resting his head on Edward's arm. The dog no longer growled. He just stayed there, loyal and still, as if he understood that the man who once brought pain had now paid his debt. Edward's voice was faint. "I thought redemption was impossible. But your dog, he led me to it." Lucas swallowed hard. "You could have run away last night. You didn't." Edward smiled softly. "Running never saves a soul." He coughed once more, eyes drifting toward the window where the sun began to rise. "Your father, he was a good man. I'm sorry, Lucas. Truly." Lucas reached out and squeezed his hand. He forgave easily. "Maybe I should learn to do the same." Edward's eyes filled with tears, but before he could speak again, his breathing slowed. Thor let out a quiet whine, nudging the man's hand one last time. By the time the sun broke through the clouds, Edward Grant was gone. Lucas buried him by the old well, the place where truth had been hidden, now turned into a place of peace. He placed the locket on the grave, beside a small wooden cross. Thor sat beside him, tail still, eyes fixed on the horizon. The wind carried the scent of rain and new beginnings. Lucas whispered, "You did good, boy. You saw what I couldn't, that some souls just need a chance to come home." Thor barked softly as if answering. Days later, the villagers came to help rebuild the barn. Word spread about the stranger who died saving Lucas's animals. No one knew the full story, only that a man had found courage at the end of his life. And every evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Lucas would stand by the grave, hat in hand, with Thor at his side. He didn't see the farm as haunted anymore. It was healed. Because sometimes redemption doesn't come in the form of miracles, but in storms that wash away the past. And sometimes, it takes a loyal dog to remind a man that forgiveness is the truest kind of strength.